you can go ahead and reach out to myself at president@PMI-CIC. We have lots of opportunities available for volunteer, different sizes of commitment levels, everything from VP of our professional development down to just needing some people to help with our social media. So let us know if you're willing to volunteer and give back to the community. We also have partnered with Peak Business Management to start providing our PMP and CAPM exam prep courses. So PMI has now changed where you do need to be a PMI authorized training partner. And so Peak Business Management is going to help us with that training moving forward. If you're interested in those certifications, you can go to our website and we have a discount code that you can use for $200 off of the class.
Hi, this is Kelsey Howard. I just had a quick question. I'm not a PMI or PMP. I'm actually a change management consultant. And I was wondering if when you're talking about volunteering opportunities, if you would be interested in people who are potentially not quite part of a PMI or a subscriber.
Yeah, if you want to reach out, we can look to see where you would best fit in. You necessarily don't have to have a PMP or anything to be a volunteer with our chapter.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. I also want to take a moment and outline some changes that are coming up in PMI specifically. So PMI is really focusing on that 5 to 75 age, and they've also developed a few new products that they're pushing out. They have Kickoff, which is a free module for you to walk through, and it talks about how to kick off a project. Wicked Problem Solving is one of the new programs you can go through with PMI, and it really is going to help you figure out how to solve those really, really wicked problems that you have. Citizen Developer is out there, which is their no code, low code. PM Red, which is more for your younger audiences. A lot of high school students is what they're targeting that with. And then Organizational Transformation is a mini cert that they have put out. So more information as we roll these out and bring those to our chapter. You can always check our Facebook page because Bobby has done, our VP of Publicity has done some small mini interviews on these and posted those there. We do have our Lunch and Learn series, so make sure that you're checking our website for those and make sure you register for those as well. We also have a ad sales and a job portal. So if you are currently in the market for a job, we have a job portal on our website, and we have current local listings if you're in the Central Illinois area for project managers. So make sure you check that out. We are always looking for our Lunch and Learn speakers. So if you have an idea, please let the VP of Publicity at PMI-CIC know. And we're also looking for a program host. This is one of those volunteer positions that we're looking for if you're wanting to give back to PMI and you want to be the product owner of an event. This would probably be great for you. So again, contact us and we can get you linked up with that opportunity. All right, so the reason why we're here today, let's switch it over to Barbara. And let me stop sharing my screen real quick. All right, so Barbara is the author of the best-selling book, Change Intelligence. She uses the power of CQ to lead change that sticks. and founder of Change Catalyst, the originator of the CQ system in developing change intelligence. For over 30 years, she has coached executives, trained leaders of all levels, and certified change agents, which includes us as project managers. I'm super excited to hear this conversation with Barbara tonight, so please join me as we welcome her to our chapter, or welcome her back to our chapter.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pam. Thank you, everyone. And yes, Redney, speaking of hair, I've been doing this since my hair really was this color. So that's awesome. Over 30 years now, it's hard to believe. Yeah. So that's where I wanted to start, actually. I wanted to start by telling you a story from my first day on the job as a change leader. And you'll hear me say that for the entire hour or so that we're together this evening, is that I really believe we're all change leaders, regardless of tenure, title, or role. Every project, or almost every project, is a change. So I think every project, program, portfolio manager is a change leader. And definitely, there's way too much going on in our workplaces and our world not to all step up and take charge of change. So my first day on the job as a change leader was back in the 1980s when I was 25 years old. And I was part of a consulting team that was working with a steel mill that was in bankruptcy. Steel mill already in bankruptcy. So there I am, and it's a room full of all men. They're all 20 or 30 or 40 years older than me, and pretty much to a man, they had worked in that steel mill their entire careers. So I get up and I introduce myself and I talk about how we're going to partner together to transform them to high performance, total quality, self-managed teams. Woohoo. And I look up in the back of the room, and a guy stands up, and he's 6'5", he's 250 pounds, he's the Hulk. He stomps right to the middle of the room and he says, "We're steel workers and we don't listen to girls." So that was my first day on the job, So why do you think that gentleman said that? I want this to be as interactive as possible. If at any time you have a question, a comment, feel free to unmute your line. You can type it in the chat. I'll do my best to scan for those. But what do you think that gentleman was thinking? And more importantly, what do you think he was feeling that caused him to say, "We're steel workers and we don't listen to girls"? Any thoughts at all on that front?
Well, I think he meant that you couldn't identify with him or his peers and what they go through on a daily basis, not only because you weren't a steel worker, but also because you were a woman, and there probably weren't a lot of female steel workers alongside them. And I feel like I see that a lot in my trade. Yeah.
Okay. What's your trade?
I work for Caterpillar Inc. And so we talk a lot about yellow iron, yellow blood, and production floor and building, that iron and building those machines. And so I feel like I've probably dealt with something similar. My husband was also a steel worker and actually poured iron. So
yeah. No, it's exciting. I'm sure we've tread a lot in the same places, and I worked everywhere from the iron ore taconite mines in Minnesota to basic steel mill making to steel finishing. I think I helped turn around or start up over a dozen different steel making facilities in the first decade or so of my career, which was very exciting. And then I moved to the Chicagoland area, and I branched into other industries, healthcare, high tech, but it was pretty exciting. So I agree with you. I think that there was probably—
the field is very cool. Don't get me wrong. It's a very cool industry. It's very interesting to be around. So
very much so. And you really feel like you're part of something, right? That you're doing something really fundamental, right? Absolutely. Yep. It's really neat to see it go from the iron ore, the scrap, to the finished product. It's super cool. Well, I agree with everything you said. I think there was probably a lot of that in the room. Who is she? How dare she? Right? She doesn't know us. She hasn't walked in our shoes, to your point. And sometimes I would joke back in the day, I would say that I was a paradigm shift just walking in the room. We talked a lot about paradigm shifts back in the day. Yeah. However, also, in addition to everything that he was thinking, those are some things he might have been thinking. I think that he might have also been feeling fear. I think there was probably a lot of fear in the room. The steel mill was already in bankruptcy. It was the only game in town. It was the only job most of them knew, and it was already in bankruptcy. So they desperately didn't want the doors to shut down forever. So right from that first day in the job, I had a lot of empathy for the targets of the change, for the targets of the project that we were embarking upon. However, I also knew right from that first day on the job that there was a heck of a lot of fear and maybe intimidation and confusion in the change leader standing in front of the room, who was me. So that's what got me down my 30-year now path of equipping and empowering my fellow change leaders, as I say, who are all of you, every project, program, and portfolio manager that we're working with. So I'd love to have another chat opportunity if people want to chat. And thank you so much, Dan, for the age difference was a big factor too. I appreciate that. But in addition to the COVID, COVID crisis, what changes are you all experiencing on the job? Because this is information that I hope you can apply to your projects. But again, all the different changes that you're dealing with. So, just type in. I'd love to hear who's dealing with a merger, acquisition, reorganization, changes to processes, practices, procedures. Probably a lot of you in your roles are spearheading those, and a new technology implementation or significant upgrade. That's always popular. Are you entering new markets or product service launches with your organizations, or having significant personnel changes such as executive transitions, shifting workforce demographics? These are things that I hear from my clients all the time. I guess we're not a chatty group this evening, which is okay. That's fine. But anyway, these are things that, again, just to demonstrate that in addition to our projects, we're all dealing all of the above. Thank you. New technology. Yes, that's always a popular one, especially with a project management audience. So it's interesting because back in the day when I started, we could work on one of these projects or changes one at a time, and analyze, design, implement, evaluate. And now we're dealing with all of these at the same time, plus our day job, plus global crises. It's rather crazy out there. And I often like to ask, do you think the changes that you're dealing with right now are increasing, decreasing, or remaining about the same in pace, scope, and complexity? I don't know anybody who says that they're decreasing. I think, yeah, just like Pam said, I think definitely that I perceive that they're increasing in pace, scope, and complexity. So I think we've all heard a lot about the high failure rate of change, right? I'm not going to belabor the point, but I think we all know that whether you think that statistics is correct, that 70% of changes fail, I think we all have a sense that change can be hard. Change can be hard for us, for others. It can be hard to lead it, play a significant role in it. And I think we all have the sense that a lot of changes that we are involved with, if not fail outright, sub-optimize and maybe fail to achieve all the ambitious goals we have for them. And what's the result? We all know the carnage that results, right? Lost investment, customers are dissatisfied. People are cynical, and every failed or sub-optimized change erodes trust. So I like to say that while most leaders today are highly experienced with change, we're far less experienced with change done right. And again, leaders at all levels, most of us are highly experienced with change, maybe much less experienced with change done right. And I wondered why that was. Well, I like to add a little humor to my presentation. So if you're multitasking now, not looking at the screen, you might want to, because you're going to miss something funny. But I found these on the internet. They must be true. Doctors smoke camel, right? And his family's happy because they eat lard. I mean, these are, again, things we thought then, right? But are they true? We have like so many models and methods, tools to manage projects, management change. Why do we still have such a high failure rate? Well, it's funny because I showed this slide actually a couple of years ago when I did a presentation for a group at the American Medical Association, and a cardiologist came up to me afterwards and he says, "Barbara, there's some research now that shows that lard isn't as bad for you as we once thought." So who knows? The more things change, the more they stay the same. But I wondered, why is that? Why do we have such a high failure rate of change when we have so much knowledge about how to manage our projects, how to manage change? Well, I thought I would take a step back and share some information about the neuroscience of change. And if you've studied any of the neuroscience of change or leadership, again, I'd love to hear from you. You can chat some of your comments, but I'm an organizational psychologist by training. And what happens is when neuroscientists place electrodes on people's brains, and introduce them to a change, the same neuroreceptors fire when our brain is introduced to a change as when we feel physical pain. Isn't that fascinating? The same neuroreceptors fire in our brain when we're introduced to a change as when we feel physical pain. So that means, right, in a very real sense, that to our brain, change equals pain. And I think that right there, that's incredibly empowering information for every project manager in the audience right now, because it says that resistance isn't bad and wrong. It's normal and natural. It's literally how our brains are wired and why we've survived as a species and thrived as individuals, because that's literally how we're wired. So often the focus is, if we get resistance on our projects, it's a sign that we're doing something wrong, right? Again, reframing resistance from our enemy to our ally, right? And instead of trying to prevent it or eradicate it, which is the #1 topic in the change management literature, overcoming resistance to change, which is exhausting. It feels like we're doing something to or against or in spite of others. To expect resistance, actually invite it. Look at it as the powerful source of information that we can use to change the only thing we can, which is ourselves. And I'm going to talk more about that. But anyway, so what happens when our brain is in change? What happens when those neuroreceptors fire and those pain receptors fire and our brain is in pain? What happens is that all the good stuff that feeds our brain, the oxygen, the glucose, gets sucked down past our necks, so we can fight, we can flight, or we can freeze. What all those three reactions have in common is that change makes us dumber, just like Homer Simpson here, right? Change makes us dumber. Just when we need all our cognitive capacity to think clearly and creatively, to invent new solutions, think outside of the box, right? Be agile, we get blinders on. Our solution space restricts. We go to our well-learned dominant responses and we don't even do those well. That's our brain on change. So that can seem like bad news, but I actually think that's good news. The good news is, again, resistance is normal and natural. It's not a sign that we're doing anything wrong as project managers. And we experience it too. When we get that pushback, when we get that challenge from our team members, our sponsors, our end users, we experience that too. It's normal and natural, and especially with all the changes that that's been thrust upon us in the last year. Absolutely. So as I like to say, in the stress of change, when our IQ goes down, building our CQ is like putting our own oxygen mask on first. We remember to breathe, separate that knee-jerk, autonomic, often unhelpful reaction from a more adaptive and leaderly response, so we can all get smarter together. So I think I'll pause there and see if there's any questions, comments. From here, I'm going to go into what is this thing called change intelligence, because this is basically why I invented change intelligence. So again, that we can all be smarter together and leading ourselves and others through change. But any comments, questions, observations before I move on?
Yeah, we had a question come in. Can you say, what does CQ mean?
I can say, what does CQ mean? And that's a brilliant, prescient question. Look at that. So what does CQ mean? So CQ, or change intelligence, and I use those terms interchangeably, as in, is you've heard of, your IQ, or at least the range. You've heard of EQ, most likely emotional intelligence. I talk about CQ, or change intelligence. So here's the definition. It's the awareness of one's own change leader style and the ability to adapt one's style to be optimally effective across a variety of people and situations. So what does that mean? Let's take it apart. It's got two parts to it. The first part is awareness. So just take me as an example. You've been hearing me speak for about 10, 15 minutes now. I'd love to hear from anybody. You can shout out, you can type in, how would you describe my style as a presenter? How would you describe my style? A word, an adjective, a phrase. What is a way that you maybe would describe my style as a presenter? Again, I've been doing this for over 30 years now in steel mills, refineries. Okay, we got open from Kathy. Thank you very much. That's very nice. Conversational. Okay, that's lovely too. Sincere, enthusiastic. Thank you, Yvette. I'm going to stop there. Enthusiastic. I always get an E word. I get enthusiastic is the #1. Funny. Thank you. Sometimes I get energetic or engaging, high energy. Thank you, Paula. Absolutely. I always, but typically I get a lot of E words, right? So it's funny because I started getting that feedback 30 something years ago when I started doing this in primarily steel mills, automotive, etc. I was living near Detroit. And I was not aware that that was an aspect of my style. The folks I work with had to hold a mirror up to my face and show me that that is my style. So you can see that all these years later, I haven't changed. I'm still enthusiastic, energetic, hopefully funny, engaging, open. However, now I know that with some audiences, in some situations, I would benefit from moderating my style, slowing my pace, not being so demonstrative. You get where I'm going, right? Not with my, Project Management Institute, Central Illinois chapter, right? Folks at dinner time after a long day of work, right? However, I know that it's sometimes, right, I would benefit from doing that because what's the corollary of becoming aware of your own style? The corollary is you become aware of other styles. Just like you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Sometimes there's a nail in front of you and that hammer is a very functional adaptive tool. Sometimes you're dealing with the COVID-19 crisis. Sometimes you're implementing a new technology. Sometimes you're launching a new product or service, right? You need different tools from your tool bag. And that's what change intelligence helps you do. First of all, become aware of what your own dominant style is, right? Then become aware that there's other styles. There's other styles. There's not to be a facilitator, obviously, but to lead projects and to lead change. And the more options we have, the more options we have, the more power we have. Not power over and against or in spite of, but power with and for others. So that's the definition of change intelligence. So hopefully that's rather intuitive. And the question I tend to get is, what are those styles of leading change? If change intelligence is the awareness of your style and the ability to adapt it, what are those styles? Well, what I say is that there are three main styles of leading change that I've distinguished: leading from the heart, leading from the head, leading from the hands. Spoiler alert, we're all combinations of all those styles. Just like any project needs an effective purpose, an efficient process, and engaged people, any change leader, any project manager needs to pay attention to all those critical components. However, we tend to have a preference, and most of us, even just by a smidgen, we tend to have a dominant preference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you right now to think about, what is your dominant style? What is your dominant style of leading change, leading projects? If only by a smidgen. You'll get the most out of this section if you really think about this, make it apply to yourself, right? And as a thank you for participating live tonight, for the folks who are here with us right now, if there is an assessment I created, and if you want to take it, it's 20 questions. It takes about 15 minutes to complete. Is online. Just email me. You'll see my contact information at the end, and we can make that happen. So again, just for the folks who are attending live tonight. So I'm not sure what is meant by hands. Well, Kathy, hold on, that is about to be revealed. So thank you for the question. So let me go through each one at a time. So I'm going to start with leading from the heart. So folks who lead from the heart, lead change, lead projects from the heart, what's on their radar screen are the people and the teams impacted by the change. So therefore, what are their behaviors? Their behaviors, they're communicative, they're collaborative, they build teams, they build trust. This is a strength-based model. All the styles are strengths. All the styles are strengths. However, any strength overdone, maybe not so much a strength anymore. So what can that look like in our experience when, and again, if you want to type it into the chat, if you want to shout it out, what can that look like in experience when a high heart, as I say, change leader, can overdo their significant strengths? And I use that as a shorthand term. This is not meant to put people in a box. Again, we're all blends of all the styles. But it's just easier kind of like to use that little shorthand, right? So folks who lead from the heart, again, their strength is that they're very caring. They want to take care of people. However, sometimes the overdone strength can be transitioning from caring to coddling, right? To not stretch people and encouraging them to grow, to enable, not in a positive sense, but maybe enable in a negative sense. And we all know those who mentored us really encourage us to step out of our comfort zone, which is so critical in any time of change. So that can be an overdone strength, over indexing on the emotions and the kind of caring devolving into coddling. Also, any style can have blind spots, right? So just like when you're driving in a car, and because you're so focused on, in this case, people, there could be other aspects of the change or the project that maybe you are missing or neglecting or downplaying, if not totally blind to. So for high heart change leaders, because people are so much on our radar screen, and I'm one of them, sometimes we can miss or neglect or downplay the need to move forward towards the goal with a strong sense of urgency. Because I always say that I'm a psychologist by training, and all human behavior can be plotted on a bell curve. So us high heart change leaders, we're at the side of the bell curve. We want 95% of the people on board and comfortable, all their needs taken into account right before we move forward. Other people are fine with go live or launch when they're the only ones on board, right? So the second style of leading change never takes their eye off the prize, right? And the goal for the change. So this is the type of change leader that they love looking outside their project or their organization. What are the trends and the innovations and the tools and the new approaches that are out there that they can get excited about and bring back? So therefore, they're very visionary, they're strategic, they're big picture, they're future oriented. Those are all strengths. Obviously, some definitions of leadership are all about that visionary style. So this is strengths. How can that play out in terms of sometimes being an overdone strength though? Well, sometimes again, they're on the train is leaving the station, and they look around and they look behind them and nobody else is on board. However, they've dropped out the people, right? But sometimes they can be charismatic, they can be inspirational in painting this picture of the future and how exciting it's going to be for all of us to get there, achieve the goal. However, sometimes the train can derail because they haven't helped the hands. They haven't shown people how to get from here to there, from current reality to future state. And that is the gift of, Kathy, to your point, leading from the hands. The hands-oriented change leaders or project managers really love all the tactics and the details that are involved in planning, getting from here to there, giving people the training, the tools, removing the barriers that stand in the way. Obviously, those are strengths. How can that strength be overdone? Sometimes high hand change leaders' heads are down. They are checking the box, change by checklist. They're efficient, but not truly effective. And they can get really enamored with their great plans, right? But not see that the world has changed and they need to pivot and adapt. And what can they be blind to or drop out or neglect? Sometimes those pesky people emotions and team dynamics and organizational culture considerations, the heart style side of change. So anyway, those are the three main styles of leading change. Leading change from the heart, focusing on the people. Leading change from the head, focusing on the purpose. Leading change from the hands, focusing on the process. So why does this matter? Well, let me tell you a quick story. So I was doing an exercise on this for a team in a healthcare organization. It's an intact team. And I described this. I broke people into groups based on what their, highest style was. And all of a sudden, when I'm talking about the strengths, overdone strengths, weaknesses, a high head woman looked at her high hands colleague and said, "Now I know why you drive me crazy." And she said, "Because I am very high head, I'm very visionary. I go to conferences, I read a lot, I get all these ideas, and I bring them to your office." And she says, "And you're a killjoy." She says, "You're a killjoy. Why?" She said, "Because you lead with no. Right away, you start telling me what's going to go wrong, why it's not going to work, et cetera, et cetera." And what the epiphany that the high head change leader realized was that she was unintentionally creating resistance in her colleague. She was communicating with her colleague, attempting to engage her and enroll her in her ideas and her projects and her innovative thinking in a way that worked for her, talking about the exciting what and the why of the change. She realized her high hand colleague could not even hear her unless she heard something about the how. The how, oh, it's not another unfunded mandate. We're going to get some priorities off our plate so we can focus on this. We're going to have the time and the budget and the resource to actually make this happen. Because a lot of times my high hands colleagues tell me that they get dinged as Debbie Downers, right? They get dinged as change resistant. Time and again, though, what I hear from them is that we're not change resistant. We want change done right. We resist failed change. We resist suboptimal change, right? And so you can write it there, see how this could be such a powerful partnership. The high head change leaders probably the most change friendly because what's on their radar screen is the positive possibility of the change. What's on the high hands change leaders radar screen is the realism, the pragmatism, everything that's going to happen to get from here to there. All those risks and those landmines and those things could go wrong. Why do we have such a high failure rate of change? We need to hear that more, but sometimes it can be perceived as resistance. So again, this is a small, but I think really telling, beautiful example of how that we can look at what looks like resistance in our colleague, in this case, leading with no or asking all those difficult questions, as not a sign of resisting necessarily, but wanting change done right. And it's an opportunity for us to reframe that resistance from our enemy to our ally, to use it as a powerful source of information to change the only thing we can, which is ourselves, to ask more questions. Tell me what I'm seeing, because what we see depends on where we sit. What we see depends on where we sit. So what was the learning here? The learning here was the high head woman realized that she needed to approach her high hand colleague saying, hey, not necessarily saying we go in this direction, but I have this idea. What do you think? And the high hands woman, instead of immediately leading with no and everything that could go wrong, say, interesting idea. Have you thought of? Or can you let me go back and process it a little more? Because high hand change leaders are all about, getting the train out of the station. The rest of us need more time to think, right? High hands folks need time to think about how is this going to affect the process and our budget and our priorities. High heart change leaders need time to think about how it's going to impact the people. Sometimes reticence to move forward right away, right, can be looked at as resistance, but sometimes people just need more soak time, SOAK, soak time, right? So they all learned a bit. And then it was funny because both of them turned to one of their high heart colleagues and said, now we know why you drive us crazy. And they said, because you're always using the F word, the F word, the feeling word. Because what's important to the high heart folks is people and their emotions. And the high heart colleague was very interested and concerned with what are people feeling about this? And what are their concerns? How is it going to impact them, right? How can we kind of, customize the messages for them and integrate their issues and questions into the solution strategy, right? So they were very frustrated with her because she wanted to go slower to get more people on board. And they were saying, oh, we're, all these different cooks in the kitchen, that sort of thing. However, people own what they help create. People own what they help create. And sometimes what looks like resistance is that people simply don't feel like they had their voice heard. I think people and organizations are smart. They don't think you're going to integrate every one of their ideas into the solution strategy, but they want to feel like they were asked. They want to feel that their opinion matters, right? I love the expression that change is threatening when done to us, exhilarating when done by us, right? And that's the gift of the high heart change leaders that bring that to the table. So anyway, I'm going to stop there. And again, none of us lead completely from the heart, head, hands. We're all blends. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I'm just wondering right now, any questions about the basic model, comments, anything at all before I move on?
Yeah, Barbara, I thought it was interesting how you just said how change is exhilarating if it's done by us. One of the things I had written down is I work in a PMO, and we took some, self-assessments, and it was funny that none of us like change, but we affect change very well all day long.
Yeah.
But actually, we do not, like change being done to us. So when you said that, that just like made me remember like, oh, well, yeah, it is exhilarating when you're the one doing it.
Yeah, exactly. That's change management 101 maximus. Participation leads to ownership and commitment, right? And better quality decisions, because I always say what you see depends on where you sit. And that's actually a quote by Rosabeth Moss-Kanter, who was, a guru at Harvard, and she wrote Change Masters and a lot of really seminal works in the field. So I can't take credit for that, but it is a brilliant quote. So yeah, no, definitely. And the other thing, another expression that I love too, is people complain before they commit. People complain before because of course in our projects, we've been thinking about what's going to happen a lot more than, the folks that are impacted, right? The stakeholders. So again, reframing those complaints, right? from resistance to, again, a powerful source of information, data that we can use, right, and leverage, surface, honor, explore it, I think is such a powerful mindset shift for us as project managers. It's very powerful. So yes, Rodney.
So when there is change that's happening in the organization, which one of these leaders should lead the conversation? Is it the people person, the purpose, or the process? Which one is the best one to communicate that?
Yeah, I always say that you can be successful in any role with any style. You're just going to do it differently. You're just going to do it differently. So again, this is not a skill-based assessment, right? Any style can be very highly effective at communication. This is a behavioral preference type assessment, right? So it's really showing what energizes us, what's on our radar screen, what do we focus on. So I think that any of these type of change leaders can really excel at communications. We might excel at different types of communications, right? The high heart change leader might really excel at telling that story that's going to emotionally engage people, connect with the heart. The high head change leader might really excel at, just being super charismatic and inspirational, painting that picture of the future vision, right? And what it can do for the organization as a whole, or the team as a whole. The high hands change leader might be amazing with communicating all the details and the steps and the interdependencies and how we're going to get from here to there, right? So again, I think that any change leader can excel at communication, but just what might be on their radar screen, what they might want to focus on, their gifts might be different. But hold that thought, because there is some interesting research results that I want to get to. So again, I'd love for people to, again, self-diagnose. What do you think you are? What's your highest style? But all of us are blends. So I'm going to talk about that. So here's a little, funny. I'm sure some of you have seen this image before. What is change intelligence? It's first the awareness of our style of leading change, right? And then second, it's the ability to adapt it. So here's a gentleman got this real take charge attitude, which is probably the combination of the head and the hands that I'm going to talk about in a minute. He likes to drive change. Here's his colleague perceiving him as bossy and demanding. Same exact behavior, right? His positive intent not matching that impact that he has on his colleague, right? So this is also an opportunity to have our positive intent leading change, just like the high hands woman in that example realized, right? Match our impact on other people and take responsibility for that. So when you put heart, head, hands together, you actually get 7 different styles of leading change, and the numbers on the arrows are represent scores on the assessment. Again, you can score from 0 to 200 on heart, head, or hands. Nobody's ever scored 0. Nobody's ever scored 200, right? We're all combinations, and depending on your scores, you get assigned to one of 7 different styles. It's also neat because the triangle is delta, the Greek symbol for change, right? So this is beyond the scope of what we can talk about in a brief hour tonight. But bottom line is, if you score very high in the heart, you're that motivating and supportive coach, and everything I just talked about leading from the heart really sounds like you. People very much on your radar screen. If everything I talked about with the head really sounds like you, you're that visionary, strategic, big picture change leader. If everything I said about the hands really sounds like you, details, planning, process, want change done right, high quality change, go slow, be sure, that executor might be your style. I am the combination of the heart and the head, the champion in the purple. So champions like me, we get where the change needs to go, and we enjoy motivating and rallying the people to get there, right? We like to champion the change. The neat thing about picturing this on the triangle is 2 things. One, the opposite of the triangle is what we tend to drop out. It tends to be our blind spot, right? What we can downplay, what we can neglect. And especially in the stress of change, right? When our IQ goes down and we get those blinders on and we go to our dominant, well-learned responses, that is most likely what we're going to drop out, right? We're going to go to our strengths. We're going to drop out what's not as motivating for us, which in my case is the hands, right? So sometimes my clients, they get it, they want it, but they just can't do it, because I haven't given them the plan and the process and the tools to get from here to there, right? So that's one thing. So I have to be responsible to keep that on my radar screen. The second thing is that the opposite style is the style that we tend to frustrate the most in leading change, right? Because what motivates us and what we're thinking about and what is important to us to know and to be influenced by is the opposite of them, right? So for example, my positive intent as a change leader as a champion change leader is to motivate. I want to motivate people to collaborate together towards the goal. That's my positive intent. My negative impact on my high hands executor colleagues sometimes can be perceived as manipulation. Positive, and I wrote it. So I still bristle when I hear that, right? Because I'm like, no, that's not me. That's not what I want. That's not my intent. However, I know that sometimes I can be perceived as being too glib and talkative maybe, and overselling, right? Because I'm so committed that I want us all to get there together, and it could really land poorly on my opposite style. So that's interesting to think about. The driver style is the combination of the head and the hands, and drivers like to move forward with the strongest sense of urgency. They like to drive towards the change. Obviously, that's mission critical with everything we're dealing with, all our global crises, and how all our organizations need to pivot rapidly to do things differently to continue to succeed. However, what's the opposite of the driver? It's the high heart coach, right? So sometimes drivers' colleagues can perceive that they're not driving with them, they're driving over them, right? They're driving over them. They drop out the people side of change. And certainly drivers can be very frustrated about the need to slow down, open the door, let people in, right? You know, that sort of thing. And so drivers again benefit from, but the positive intent that I hear from drivers over and over again is that our intent is to build resiliency in people. Our intent is to bring people along, but to bring them along in a way that gets the job done, right? So we can all be successful together. But sometimes the way they go about it is not perceived positively, right? So an opportunity for them. The facilitator in the orange is the combination of the heart and the hands. Facilitators love to be in the trenches with people, make it real in the field, really hold people's hands, take care of them. People love having facilitators on their team because they're very concerned about the people, and they're very concerned about doing things right, the process. However, sometimes facilitators can frustrate the visionaries, for example, because they could, they have their heads down, they're focused on how we always did things in the past, going very slowly to make sure that everybody's on board and we have everything laid out. And sometimes they're perceived as more supportive team players than strong team leaders. And they could, sometimes not be seen as that strategic thought leader. But again, it's their choice, right? They're choosing to have their heads down. They could always choose to lift their heads up, strategically network, get their voice heard in deliberations, that sort of thing, and not exhaust themselves, because so often facilitators carry people on their back because they want to be kind and helpful and take care of people instead of encouraging people to stretch and grow. So those are some opportunities for facilitators. Adapters are in the middle. Adapters are the combination, kind of mid-range heart, head, hands. And some people say to me, well, is the point to become an adapter? And the point is not to become an adapter, because the definition of change intelligence is the awareness of our style of leading change and the ability to adapt our style, right? So embrace our style. All styles are good, all styles are strengths. However, knowing that in certain situations we might need to adapt it, because adapters have a lot of strengths. So if we were to hear from a group of adapters, they intuitively sense the need for head, heart, hands. They intuitively know when something's missing. If there's lack of engagement, they can jump in and they can play the team builder, or they can do a pulse survey or a town hall or walk arounds. If they sense that people are working really hard, but their efforts are misplaced, they can paint that picture of the future vision and that true north. They can leverage the head. If there's people are paralyzed during the headlights, not moving forward, they can add the hands, project manage, add tools, add training, etc. So they're very adaptable. However, sometimes they can be too adaptable. So they can seem chameleon-like, people can be confused by them. And when it's extreme, even perceived trust issues, because what is trust? Demonstrated action over time, right? And if you don't explain to people why you're switching gears, that could cause trust issues with people. So I always say to adapters, you intuitively see the need to pivot and switch, help other people be smarter to use your words, coach them in terms of why you're switching gears and why we need to, kind of adapt and do something differently. So anyway, those are the 7 styles of leading change. Again, if anybody has a question about any of this, please let me know. I think it's, somewhat intuitive though. But what I thought I would do if there's no questions right now, I thought in the few minutes we have left, maybe I'll move from change intelligence for us as individuals to building change intelligent teams. Would that sound good? Talk about change intelligent teams, because we're all like managing project teams and on many different teams. So let me tell you a quick story, a quick case study, and then I'd be interested in your analysis when I'm going to show you a team profile. And now that you've been at this for 45 minutes, I think you're going to be Dr. CQ like me. You're going to be able to analyze this team and do some consulting around it. So here's the situation. So this client, actual client, I talk about this client in my book, and there's a couple case studies about this client actually, is an ice cream maker, and one of the largest ice cream makers in the country actually. And they had a bold new strategic agenda that they wanted to double in size. So they chartered a steering committee based on with executives that were doing all kinds of investigations about how to double size, building new facilities, acquiring acquisitions, so, and they were also, they also realized that if they were going to double in size, they had to retool a lot of their internal processes to enable that expansion. So the steering committee, consisting of executives, chartered several different project teams, one of which was a learning and development project team, because historically they had trained and developed people, especially in the production areas where they made the ice cream, production and maintenance, by tribal knowledge. Somebody would get brought in, they would get partnered with somebody who'd been around for 5 or 10 or 20 years, and they learned what they knew. They didn't learn what they didn't know. They used standard operating procedures as training tools, which aren't really training tools, but that's what they had. But they knew that if they were going to double in size, they really needed to get into, more 21st century best-in-class approaches to learning and development. So they chartered a learning and development team that was primarily consisting of frontline leaders, let's say. So folks in the training organization, frontline supervisors, that sort of thing. So that's the going in situation. There was a steering committee consisting of executives. There was a project team consisting of frontline leaders. And the project team, again, their charter was to improve the approach to onboarding and training folks in the production areas. 4 months goes by, there's no traction. Nothing's happening. Everybody's frustrated with each other. They bring me in. And so I had worked with the new learning and development manager who had just been there for 6 months at his previous company. So he brought me in. And I gave everyone on both teams the CQ assessment, and drum rolls, here's the results. Okay. So how would you interpret what was going on here? So you see that the stars, right, are how the steering committee executives, right, on the executive team scored on the CQ assessment. And you see the circles are where the project team members on the L&D project team scored. So again, I'd love to, if you'd like to unmute your line and share what you think about these dynamics, or if you just want to type into chat what you might think. But basically it's pretty intuitive, right? And so what I hear time and time again is this collective aha. Now we see. It gives people a voice, a way to describe dynamics that they've been perceiving, but maybe not really have the words to articulate. And it enables you to give and receive feedback a lot less defensively, because everybody is trying to do the right thing. Everybody's leveraging their strengths. It's just they're working at cross purposes, right? So the steering committee that was, very high head, what was their frustration with the project team? We're not moving fast enough. It's been 4 months. Where's the outcome? Where's the deliverable, right? They want to get to that shiny place of nirvana, right? The project team, right? Very high heart. What was their frustration with the steering committee? Well, we invite you to our meetings, but you don't come, right? High heart teams want to be communicated with, right? And people are pushing back. They're saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We've been around 150 years, right? Why do we need a new approach to training and development? Why do you need me to help design new things? I'm so busy producing, blah, 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 blah. And they felt the steering committee was abdicating their responsibilities. They weren't coming and doing walkarounds and town halls and that sort of thing. So they were each frustrated with each other. Also, you can see what the gap is, right? What's the gap? What's the missing is the hands, right? And the joke about this organization that they told me when they brought in, they said, we have 2,000 flavors of ice cream, but when it comes to leading change, we have a flavor of the month, right? We have a flavor of the month. That they have lots of great ideas, very high head in terms of their executive ranks, lots of heart, 100, 150-year-old family-owned company, a lot of heart, However, what got dropped out was the hands actually executing, implementing, and sustaining, right? So again, it gives you an opportunity to understand why you've succeeded in some ways, why you've struggled in some ways, but importantly, it leads to actions that you can take moving forward. So what did they do based on this? Well, they partnered this gentleman here, who I'm hovering over the circle that's right in the driver space. He was actually the project manager and the head of learning and development, the new guy, right? With this gentleman here, the high heart champion, as I like to say, on the executive team, who they had complementary CQ styles. Also, one was a newbie, right, and an L&D professional. One was a 35-year veteran of the largest production facility, so a lot of credibility within the organization. They partnered together to co-lead both the steering committee and the project team, right? Again, so they can help each other, as we say, not just the golden rule, do unto others as you want to be done unto, but the platinum rule, do unto others as they want to be done unto. So co-led both groups, right? And you know, have that partnership. They realized that, so that's one thing you can do, is partner people in new and different ways. They also realized that they had an opportunity to bring on some new people on the team to supplement where they lacked, right? So they brought in a quality manager to the steering committee, a quality engineer who owned the SOPs that they used as training documents to the project team. One was a driver, one was an executor. They got more hands that way. They also realized that the steering committee could benefit from some training in storytelling, connecting with the heart. So we did some of that, right? Some training in storytelling, communications. And they realized the project team would benefit from some training in making the business case, because sometimes high heart teams can seem whiny and complaining. I need more resources, I need more time. How to phrase that in a business sense so the executives, the higher head folks, can really hear that. So we did that. We realized that the entire company, right, they extrapolated and said, you know, we think this is actually very indicative of the entire company, lower hands. We need all those tools in the project management toolkit. So they actually created a, you know, robust project management toolkit that had, you know, how to effectively charter a team, manage a team, etc., which they never really had before, right? So that's an example of what they did to help the hands. So again, you know, simple but powerful, right? It's simple common language that you can use to engage for change together, but powerful because it's actionable. And right, you know, as Tom said, good luck getting the project done on time with such low focus on the hands. And that's actually one of the things we really tried to help. So, and another message that I like to give to the project management community a lot is that a lot of you have these very high hands tools in your toolkit, right? Really helping figure out how to get from here to there, making it real in the field, very tactical, implementing, sustaining. And when I look at the database of folks who have completed the CQ assessment, right, and there are over 18,000 now around the world, from, you know, the C-suite to the front line, a lot of project management folks, but a lot of folks in HR, engineering, nursing, you know, a lot of different industries and levels and job classes. This is what we see. About 42% heart, 40% head, only 18% hands. And the way I look at this is that strategy is sexy. You know, a lot of people want to look at themselves as a, you know, visionary, high head change leader. And we all know the bottom line benefits of engagement. I think sometimes the tactics, the hands, can be undervalued, right? Can be undervalued. And yet, I think that that's a big part of the high failure rate of change. So I always tell project managers that, you know, what's rare is precious, and we need more of what you have to offer. I hear Tom say a lot of times we have very unbalanced project teams. I think this tool could really help to ID any upfront issues. Exactly, Tom. So as I always say, that just like there's no ideal change leader style as an individual, there's no ideal, I don't believe anyway, profile as a team. Some people think you need an entirely balanced team. I don't think that's true. I think the ideal team is aware of its profile and in action to shore up any deficits, and not just shore up deficits, but avoid overdoing your strengths too, right? And when you do a team profile, you can see sometimes there's coalitions or factions or an outlier, and it really gives you a great ability to know who's on your team and to be able to make some agreements right up front so you can be more effective together. So that's one of the biggest ways that clients do use it. Also, we tend to see some differences by level, right? So not surprisingly, probably folks at the top of organizations, right, the senior ranks tend to be somewhat higher head. Not all of them by any means. It's not even 50%, you know, maybe 30, 40 something percent lead from the head. But again, don't take that to mean that if you're like me, a high heart change leader, or if you're a high hands change leader, that you can't aspire to the senior ranks, because we definitely need all those styles at any level. However, we do tend to see a little more at the senior ranks. And so what's the implication of that? Well, a lot of times these folks are sponsors, are senior leaders. They've been thinking about the changes for the longest time. They're most bought into it, right? They have that external perspective, but they're the most isolated from the impacts of the changes throughout the organization. One CEO once said to me, Barb, it's like we're all monkeys in a tree. We're all monkeys in the tree. I'm the top monkey, right? And I look down and what I see the smiling faces, the monkeys below me. They look up and what do they see? And he patted his bottom, right? What you see depends on where you sit. Folks on the frontline leaders, supervisors, like in this case study example, tend to lead more from the heart. I thought from the hands because that's where execution happens. In fact, and this is one way that the CQ assessment is different than a Myers-Briggs or the DISC, which frontline supervisors a lot of times tend to have, especially in manufacturing environments, shall we say, more like DC or ISTJ, more the technical types of styles. When it comes to leading change, folks on the front line very strongly more leading from the heart. Why? Because that's where change happens. Change happens by engaging, communicating, collaborating. However, folks on the front line can seem most resistant. Why? Because it's their behavior who has to change the most, right? So they can seem the most resistant. Folks in the middle, I would respectfully submit, a lot of folks on the call, right? They tend to be more balanced in their style, somewhat more hands, but also squeezed. Edicts from above that they might totally not understand or buy into, pushback from below that they might not have all the talking points and the resources, information effectively addressed. They're squeezed. It's a very difficult position. So I say that change intelligent organizations communicate down in different ways, right? Ways that not just speak to the head, to the what and the why of the change to the head, but also engage the heart, tell the story, and really equip the hands. So communicate again in a way that's customized to the needs and concerns of different groups, and especially give feedback up. Get feedback up in a way that's not political suicide, but political savvy, because what you see depends on where you sit. And folks on the front lines and in the middle ranks see those landmines and those roadblocks and those things that could go wrong. And sometimes we can look up and say, senior leaders, you should know. But I always say, don't shit on yourself or others, because they don't know, because we're not telling them. They don't know because we're not telling them. They're not mind readers. They're surprised, right? It's so hard to get feedback, let alone real-time actionable feedback. It's incumbent upon all of us, upon us to say what's going on, because what you see depends on where you sit. I always say that that's the number one change leadership capability. It's not head, heart, hands, it's courage. It's that leadership courage to get your voice heard as we move forward. So anyway, if you're interested in this sort of thing, there's research studies about leading change across the globe at different levels, across genders on my website. Happy to send you any information, but just pop over there and you can download a lot of good stuff. So anyway, all right. So let's wrap it up. I know that it's late. We just have a few more minutes. So here's a little energizer for you. So what parking spot number is the car parked in? Anybody? Shout it out, type it in. What parking spot number do you think? 87. All right, Ajit, you got it. Ajit or Ajit, thank you so much. 87. And Pamela, you got that too. I could have stared at this all day. I never got it. So acknowledgement, hats off to all of you. So here's how you figure it out. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that funny? I got it from a client. So anyway, so to overcome resistance and lead change your perspective. Change your perspective, right? Change your perspective. I love that. So, all right. So a joke by Rodney Dangerfield. Okay, Rodney Dangerfield, he tells this joke. He says, a guy goes to the doctor and he says, doctor, I'm in so much pain. I broke my arm in 3 places. What do I do? And the doctor says, don't go to those 3 places again. But that's what we do. We go to those 3 places, we go to our dominant style, and we put ourselves and others in a painful position. When we see we're getting resistance out there, the opportunity for us is to reframe that resistance from our enemy to our ally, use it as a powerful source of information we can use to change the only thing we can, which is our mindsets and behavior. If we see there's low engagement, there's low trust, there's questioning, there's fear, engage the heart. What's in it for me, for us? Deal with my fears and my hopes. If we see that there's confusion, about the change. Maybe we need to lighten the head. Why are we doing it? What are we doing? How will it help me? And if, again, people are stuck, not getting into effective action, maybe they need training. Maybe they've had a one-off training session or a quick reference guide. Maybe they need coaching. Maybe there's new and different tools they need. Maybe there's barriers, communication systems, operation systems, reward systems, standing in the way of good people behaving consistently with the change. This is a nice one-page cheat sheet of what we can do to engage for change. So let me just show you this. This is my contact information. Again, reach out at any time. For those of you who are listening live, if you do want to test drive the CQ assessment, as a thank you for being here with us tonight, I'm happy to send you a complimentary invitation. And you can always ask me for more information, how to get it as a standalone instrument. Everyone comes with a copy of my print book. There's a free code to take it as well. Also, you can download two chapters of my book from my website. There's lots of free tools on my website, case studies, research reports. You can view a keynote. You can listen to another webinar, podcast, lots of free stuff there if you're interested. And of course, I do this sort of thing for clients too, if you're interested in a lunch and learn like this, or a longer term learning journey. Several clients have integrated CQ into their project management or change management toolkit because it adds that missing component of not just managing change or managing projects, but actually, leading change in projects. So happy to talk to you about that at any time too. And so as maybe any final questions or comments are coming in, thanks Pam for showing my website in the chat. It's also at the bottom, the footer of my slides. Look at the screen. You probably see the train going into the station from the left to the right. Use your brain and make the train go in the opposite direction. Use your brain and make, isn't that cool? Do you see it? You see it going in the opposite? Just stare at it for a little bit, look at it, right? It's kind of cool. So that's my closing comment to you. You got the power. You got the power to change the direction of the train with just the way you think, right? Your mind. That's what you can control. Again, I think that's actually an empowering message. We got the power, we got the change. And there's so much going on, again, in our workplaces and our world. I think we each need to look at each other as change leaders, on our projects and beyond. So again, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to spend, a few more minutes. If there's questions, comments, anything on people's minds, bring it on.
Thank you, Barbara. I really enjoyed this topic tonight, and I think it really aligns specifically with PMI's goal right now as well, making us change makers in our organizations. That's what project managers always have been. So this aligns really well with that goal. And I think that this is one of those things that we can put in our toolkit and use. I think that the comment around this tool could help us ID any upfront issues from Tom, to me, is really important, because when we learn these tools and we're aware of them, and we can ID some of these things in our teams, the quicker we can get to solution. So if you guys have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and we can take them that way, or you can put them in the chat and we can go through them.
Yeah, and I like what you said too, Pam, because, oh, I'm sorry, did somebody unmute their line?
Yeah, Barb, I did. Barb,
Hey,
hi,
Bobby.
it's Bobby. Hey, Barb, quick question. So for, not just for leading change, how do you address companies like startups where they're actually very innovative? They try to come out with new products, and it's not so much, I guess it's a change, if you will, because it's really something new. So how do people approach joining a startup, as an example, because it's so drastically different? For example, if I was employee number 2 for Uber, what should my mindset be? As an example, how do you address that? If you could share your thoughts.
Yeah, again, I think that we can be successful with any style and any role, right? And I think that, obviously I would, but we're energized, we're motivated by certain things based on our style, right? So startups definitely attract a lot of high head folks, right? Because the vision, right? The possibility, the new and different. And so they attract a lot of folks. They also attract a lot of adapters, right? Folks who can pivot very easily, right in the middle of the triangle. So I that's one thing I see a lot. And though, eventually the startup will need to, attract folks that have, that focus on different things. So people who, really want to help the hands, right? Who really want to, be very tactical, and who really want to, achieve specific results and deliverables. And so, and also to bring people along and, really kind of not just look up at the big people picture goal, but, the people who are going to partnering along the journey. So we kind of need that balanced approach. So sometimes in startups, the opportunity is to remember that agility rhymes with stability. Agility rhymes with stability, that we both need that agility to pivot and adapt, and, everything that, a crazy startup situation, and I help startup, again, a dozen different steel mills, right, needs to do. We also need that stability. We need that firm grounding. And I think that's, our habits, our routines, things that people can count on, right? With all the things that are shifting and changing, what can they count on? Well, they can count on our mission. They can count on our values. They can count on that we're intent on, serving our customers in this way, taking care of our people in this way, right? We can count on certain, again, routines and procedures we have in terms of how we operate, right, internally with each other. So again, I think that for a startup, you can be successful, again, with any style, with any role. But one of the things that I think is especially incumbent upon a startup is that, remembering that any successful startup, like any successful change or project, is going to need all three. It's going to need an effective purpose. Like, what's the goal for this? What are we going for? It's going to need an effective and efficient process to get there, which, again, doesn't have to be bureaucratic and slow us down, but, we need some systems and structures in place to be successful. And it's going to need engaged people, right? We can't just talk about the exciting mission. We have to talk about, the people, and take care of them, and sometimes go slower than we want, to make sure that they're all on board with us, right? And we're really hearing and getting the message from everybody. So again, hopefully that's helpful. But that's been my perception of startups, again, attracting a lot. Like when I was in Silicon Valley, when my book was first published in 2013, 14, I was working with a group from the Silicon Valley, and they said that, yeah, it was amazing. They were almost all high head, and they said, that's why we fail sometimes, right? Because we're just out there, and we're not grounded enough. We're not grounded enough, and we need to attract and retain the people who help us be grounded, create those kind of systems and processes that we can have that replicable success, right? And really keep people engaged and not kind of jumping ship and going off to the next one. So we need all those perspectives.
Thank you, Barb.
Barb, what kind of change leader is most effective in leading zombies?
That's hilarious. That's awesome.
What I mean by that, it's like they've been doing this forever, 30 years, and this is how it is, and all that. Zombie.
Yeah. That's hilarious. That's great. So I was a huge oh my God, what was that zombie? I'm a huge science fiction. Yeah. Walking Dead. Yeah. I was like totally into that. That's so funny. So again, I think that there is I think that's the opportunity, again, to look at resistance as a powerful source of information. So what's under the hood with that resistance, right? What is causing us to have that? We've always done it this way, right? I'm gonna, kind of source of resistance, and that's the, and so I think that the biggest change leader capability is the ability to ask powerful questions, and any change leader style can ask powerful questions, right? We're coming to you, Barb. That's right. That Barbara, right? Do you remember that? I'm sorry, I'm distracted now by a Lord works well with zombies. Oh my gosh, these comments are really, really, really hilarious. So and so that is that from the Night of the Living Dead. The first scene in the cemetery is Barbara, they're coming to get you, Barbara. So you're right. That's bringing me back. That's hilarious. So we have this whole zombie thing going now. All right, great. So we're hitting into happy hour, by the way. So I think some of us are transitioning into there. So anyway, but I would say that, again, I think at some point, right, that high heart change leaders will have a lot of patience, Redney, with really, you know, the one-on-one, the dealing with people's concerns, right? You know, really feeling that that is their sweet spot and they want to do that, right? You know, so sometimes heart change leaders will have a lot of patience for those kind of conversations. However, sometimes high hands change leaders, like my favorite co-facilitator is a very strong executor, high hands. And he is the one that will ask those detailed questions of people, right? That will really help unearth what is going on with them. Because even though we hear a lot, we've always done that, or you know, blah blah blah, we've always been successful this way. Sometimes there's some real fears there, right? And sometimes also there's some real opportunities in the system, right? Or challenges in the system that really is preventing people from moving forward with our project, right? There's some interdependencies that nobody's unearthed. And so a high hands change leader can actually be patient in the sense of really asking those nitty gritty questions, sometimes to understand the details of what are standing in people's way. And sometimes high head change leaders, right? Even though they might not have the patience to get into the details or to have all those one-on-ones, they can sometimes just be so inspirational, right? In, hey, you know, if we did it this differently, and they can sometimes hook into people's why, right? You know, people's why, like, you know, start with why and what really is your passion. Help people, because sometimes people like that, again, you know, none of us started off with, I want to be in my cubicle and where's my stapler, right? You know, and so sometimes just being in the presence of those high head change leaders that have that kind of passion and that fire can rekindle that in some other people. So again, I really think that any of us, any style, can be that kind of person who turns our resistant colleagues around. We're just probably going to do it differently, and we're probably going to connect differently with different types of people.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
There's some more great zombie comments that you need to check out.
Awesome. Great.
So I do have one more question. So in other things like strength finders, they say that you tend to never change, right? When you take the test, it never changes. Is this the same way? Like or as you mature and as you flex your skills or in different roles, you might possibly see a change?
There is a strong retest reliability. So a lot of people that they take it over time, they do score very similarly. However, it's not expected. So I, again, as an organizational psychologist, I intentionally created the CQ assessment to be a behavioral-based assessment, not a trait-based assessment. So to not be something that you're born with and you die with, you develop very early, because since it's behavioral, clearly, some of us engage in certain behaviors early in our career, and then over time we play different roles, we get different tools in our tool bag, and we see that we can be successful leveraging these different skill sets, right? So definitely it is, some people are very consistent over time like me, but I've always had my same role, be an external consultant, right? Other people, they've changed roles over time, and they've kind of adapted their style. Like, for example, and I don't have hard evidence about that, but there's suggested evidence. Like, for example, folks older in their careers, more senior folks, tend to lead more from the heart. Why? Because they probably learned over time that to engage for change, right? Again, people, it's threatening when done to you, exhilarating. They probably learn that over time, that they need to lead more from the heart, right? Or at least augment the heart with their other strengths in the other areas. So that's just kind of a suggestive thing. But again, not right, wrong, good, or bad. It's just, what do we learn, and what do we gravitate to at maybe different points in our career, with different types of experiences.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
I know that we're close to time. Does anyone have any additional questions?
I think Kevin's invited us all to head down to the Winchester for a pint, so I'm all about that. I think that's a good note to adjourn on.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Before we actually adjourn, if you guys would be willing to turn on your cameras and we could take a quick picture of those of you who have joined us today, that would be wonderful. Not
I stop
everyone
sharing?
leave
Okay.
all at the same time. Yeah, if you could stop sharing, then we
Okay.
can use the whole screen.
Oh, awesome.
Awesome. People
That's a
are
great idea.
not leaving. That's a plus. All right.
This is a really attractive group. Congratulations.
You're awesome, Barb.
Yeah, thanks, Red. Your hair's
All right.
awesome.
All right, everybody look at the camera. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Barbara, so much for being with us today in this amazing conversation. Your PDUs will be reported for you, so you don't have to worry about that if you're needing PDUs reported. And again, if you are ready to volunteer with chapter and be part of events like this, please let us know and reach out. Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Bye for now.